Now, one of the interesting things with a self-referential thing, and in mythology and in psychology, there's the concept of the king, there's the concept of the queen, there's the concept of the leader. And the job of the leader of the self, the conscious mind, for example, in psychology, is to take care of every part of the psyche. Meaning, a healthy king or a healthy leader says, we're going out on an adventure. Now you organize water over here. You get the cell phones. You make sure the batteries are charged, and delegates a protocol of success so that the adventure results in well-being rather than death and failure. And this is what a leader does. And so if fun is to be at the top in a leadership position in an empathic paradigm of human consciousness, then if we're going to elevate fun to this point of leadership, whereas it is the only self-referential value, then we have to acknowledge and deal with all of the other values. Freedom can be good, freedom can be bad, because, you see, I can use my freedom to walk out in front of a bus and get my arm amputated. That's not a good use of freedom if we want to feel good and don't want to feel bad. I can use my power to kill 10 children and probably break up several marriages in the process, because usually when a child dies, the grief is so high in a culture that doesn't know how to grieve that the parents have to blame to numb the pain of the grief. And usually who they blame is themselves first, and after a while then they blame their partner. And when the partner is in that amount of pain and being blamed by the other partner, usually they get a divorce. And so if I use my power to kill several children, I not only destroy the children, I will also probably break up several marriages, increase the amount of self-mutilation in the teenagers in that marriage, etc., etc. So it doesn't always result in well-being. But I could also use my power to buy trees at a time our planet needs trees. I could, as I did recently, buy 200 trees and plant them in the ground to, participate in reforestation and more reduction. What my goal was to be CO2 neutral. And it takes about 200 trees per person to be CO2 neutral. 200 trees, each doing their thing every day, will compensate for all the tremendous impact that we have driving around, using electricity, using waters, transporting objects, eating food, moving food, garbage, all that kind of thing has a CO2 impact. And so we can use our power to plant 200 trees, or we can use our power to kill several children. And this speaks to the fact that power is neutral. Now, the deity is at the top of the hierarchy. The deity is the ideal. And so it's important to understand the implications of the ideal of fun. And in particular, to break apart the patronization, the diminishment, the chauvinism as it is directed towards fun. Because, as we all know, in a chauvinistic cult, where men, and thus the masculine, has been elevated over female and the feminine, out of fear and for survival, that which is feminine, that which is emotional, is diminished, is shamed, humiliated, devalued, and ranked lowly. One of the greatest sins in the American cult is to be too emotional, i.e. too feminine. and fun being something felt as opposed to a concrete, objective, masculine structure such as bits of paper called money. I mean, these things that are elevated are a little bit flimsy compared to a felt human experience. Who among us would prefer bits of paper over a felt experience of well-being? Only those brainwashed with a chauvinistic cult would ever consider the intelligence of a bit of paper over a felt human experience. But that is the state many of us find ourselves in today. So let's look at the technology of fun, of the mathematics of fun, because they're quite profound if we dig deeper and piece things together mathematically, as opposed to through the lens of chauvinism provided by our cult. And the first thing is that fun leads to success. And the reason is simple. It's more fun to succeed than it is to fail. When you want to feel good, when you want to experience well-being, that is the goal. Success is the embodiment of well-being personally, in the family system, in the community, nationally, and as a species. In order for the species to succeed at feeling good and not feeling bad, the environment that hosts the species, the host body, which is the planet, in an ecological framework, is the fundamental foundation upon which all human well-being rests. And so, if well-being rests on the host body, on the well-being of the species, on the well-being of the country, on the well-being of the community, of the family, and of the individual, or if the well-being rests in the individual, and out of many individuals experiencing well-being, a family, out of many families experiencing well-being, a community, out of many communities that experience well-being, a country, out of many countries experiencing well-being, a species, and out of many out of the species feeling well-being, a planet. You can see on the one hand we have the macro, the macro fractal pattern, which is the relationship between a species and its host, and the micro fractal pattern, which is the individual ego in relationship to the host psyche, to the individual body, the relationship between the individual and the family that gave birth to the individual. Is that a fractal pattern of violation, of betrayal, of domination, of chauvinism, and of abuse, or is that a fractal pattern of service, loyalty, competency, love, and symmetry between the masculine and feminine self? So, fun leads to success, success in the accomplishment of sustainable levels of well-being and the diminishment of unnecessary suffering, because success is more fun than failure. Competency. Success leads to competency, because competency is the foundation of all success. How do you succeed at driving from San Francisco to Los Angeles if you don't know how to drive? How do you succeed in walking out of the range of the forest fire if you don't know how to walk? Competency is the foundation of all success. And love is the foundation of all competency. So we see that it's more fun to succeed than to fail. So fun leads to success. We see that in order to succeed rather than fail, we have to have competency. Love is the foundation of all competency. Love is the feminine expression of the masculine counterpart that is competency. If you love enough, you care. If you care enough, you see. If you see enough, you understand. If you understand enough, you empathize. If you empathize enough, you attune, you modulate, you adjust. When you adjust with empathy, you succeed. Meaning, if I want to love you, what I want is for you to feel good and not to feel bad sustainably. That being the key word, differentiating an opium dose over a bowl of soup, or something that's true and difficult to hear over a lie that's easy to hear. We're looking for sustainable rather than drug-like fixes. So we have the framework of time. When I understand you and attune to you with competency, I succeed in increasing your well-being. We come into the domain of human needs to survive, to feel secure, to have a sense of love and belonging, to have a sense of self-esteem, high self-esteem, to have a sense of one's gifts, who one is at an innate level, to bring those gifts out into the world and succeed in creating abundance, to contributing to the uniqueness, the complexity, the beauty of the world. In doing so, to create wealth. Personal wealth, wealth for the community, wealth for the species. And in actualizing and realizing our potential in this way, to a point of abundance and safety, we release the consciousness from the clutches of the reptile. Release the consciousness from the clutches of the limbic brain. Release the consciousness from the clutches of the obsession with logic and reason into the larger field, into the transcendent brain, whose greatest human need is to be a part of something bigger than the limited self, bigger than the ego. To help one's country win a race in the Olympics, to further the study of mathematics, to develop a new plant that can help end hunger or help reclaim desert, to participate in a project bigger than the individual self that does what? That creates more sustainable well-being and diminishes more unnecessary suffering, but not just for the limited, isolated ego, but for something bigger than the self, for the family, for the community, for the country, for the culture, for the species. But the ultimate foundation is for the environment that hosts the species. Because if you are competent, if you are intelligent, you understand that to kill off the oxygen supply for the species in order to make money for the family is not sustainable. in an asymmetrical pattern, where the next generation has a higher chemical load in its body, a lower attention span, a higher degree of trauma, a higher degree of dopamine addiction than the generation before. When you understand that to hand off a host environment that has more volatile weather conditions conducive to trauma, you understand that the species collapses ultimately back to the level of animal. That if we want a global culture of reptiles in which trauma spreads rampantly from environment to individual, from individual to individual, and captures the potential of consciousness within the reptilian brainstem, then we must persist in the rape and violation of our host body as persistently and with as much integrity as we persist in devaluing the feminine psyche inside every man and inside every woman in our cult, where feelings are something to be shamed, to be silenced, to be suppressed, rather than honored and understood as a science, the science of emotion. Through the instrument of the human heart, through the instrument of the psyche, a scientific instrument with as much precision, with as much potential as any external gadget or thermometer. Once the veil of chauvinism is lifted, once the dogma of repressing and suppressing the internal, the emotional, the feminine, and the subjective in order to ennoble the objective, the exterior, the materialistic, the masculine. When we stop thinking about 7 generations, obviously we regress below some of our cultural ancestors who had more vision, the kind of vision that is natural when individuals are brought into the world with dignity and have a sense of dominion, a sense of shared ownership with the ecology, a partnership with the ecology of which they are a part, when they understand that the earth is sacred, evolution is natural, when choices are made with 7 generations in mind. We do not destroy the foundation of the host body in order to perpetuate the dogmas of a particular cult. We do not become a cancer, an organism that reproduces rapidly and asymmetrically, inconsistent with its host body. A cancer is a tremendous success story because cancer cells emerge out of a host body and grow faster than the host body's original cells. A cancer has a design for rapid and efficient reproduction that is disproportionately faster than the host in which it resides, and which threatens the host body in the process. The fatal flaw in the cancerous endeavor is that the final success of the cancer is to destroy the host in which it resides. And so you have this pattern, and this is why it is not consistent with sustainable well-being, with sustainable fun. If you are a Cancer, you have a pattern of exponential reproduction out of synchrony with your host body to a feverish level, expanding, expanding, expanding until you kill the host. When the host falls to the ground, the Cancer has a brief moment of complete triumph, no more resistance as it ravages the body. Things are looking good for the Cancer at that moment, and then the blood stops. The heart stops. The neural peptides stop. And the Cancer, having successfully violated its host body, collapses to the ground with its host and rapidly dies. It is not sustainable fun. It's short-lived fun. It's expedient. We're not talking about 7 generations. We're not even getting through 1. So, when you attune with love, you create success. Success at creating well-being. As the transcendent mind in human consciousness is released, the greatest joy, the greatest fulfillment, the greatest need, the greatest urge within human consciousness to be a part of something bigger, to participate competently in a way that creates more sustainable well-being, not only for the self, but for the host body, for the species, for the cult. This is the journey. This is the blossoming of human consciousness. And it releases a mathematical field that is exponentially bigger than the instinctual sociopathic field that brought the human body to a point where it could be host to transcendent consciousness. Success. It is more fun to succeed than to fail, because failing to feel good instead of feeling bad is less fun. It is more successful to be competent, because if you are incompetent, you fail to feel good and reduce unnecessary suffering. All competency begins with love. When you care enough to attune with understanding your odds of succeeding at helping the other person to feel good and not feel bad go up, statistically speaking. That attunement process can happen in a day, in a year, in a lifetime. It is a continual process of technology of communication, technology of awareness, mutual awareness. If I ask you, do you like it like this or do you like it like this, and you do not know yourself, you are unlovable in the sense that you don't have the information necessary for me to be competent. If I understand you more than you understand yourself by listening to your body, your face expressions, by listening to the data, and your well-being goes up because I attuned to the best practices in the field, in the domains in which you were too ignorant to communicate what was needed for my well-being, then I become loving by becoming competent in the development and in the dissemination of well-being, of fun, and in the diminishment of suffering. Out of my competence comes pleasure, comes survival, comes security. If I am competent with love, if I move through the self-absorption of the child that needs to attach to survive, the self-absorption of the adolescent that needs to have lust that needs to fuck in order to get what it wants, that needs to passionately engage to get what it wants, to the adult, the first love that transcends the self-absorption of the ego, the adult love which is about you on the outside. Then I love enough to see. I see enough to understand. I understand enough to empathize. I empathize enough to attune. You see, if you're rhythm, if you're swaying here at the dance, and I want to attune to you, I've got to match your sway. If I don't care, or if I don't understand, I cut you off. I turn my car into yours. I hit your body. I don't attune. To understand and empathize with love is to attune to the other human being. To attune to the other human being with love and understanding and sight is to create pleasure, is to increase fun. It's more fun. It's less painful. It feels good. It feels less bad. And as an adult, the attunement process, the impact, is with a goal to help you survive, feel secure, have a sense of love and belonging, your human needs, have a sense of self-esteem, to develop your gifts, to bring those gifts out into the world, and to realize the possibility field, the probability field that is released when your gifts are part of the field. When someone attunes to you in that way, with competence, you experience gratitude, you experience pleasure, you experience safety, you experience a cessation, a release in stress and violation, and you come forward towards love. You feel love for the person who loves you with competence. It is innate. It is viral in nature. Love infects another person with love because love is the synergy of abundance, safety, pleasure, attunement, and gratitude, which are the natural byproducts of competent love. And when that synergy mixes in an environment that's growing more sustainable because of the bringing of new gifts and resources to the terrain, there is a transcendent feeling of love. There is a sense of being part of something bigger. And if that love that the person feels is honored on its journey towards masculine discipline, the new love that is felt, that is infected in a new individual, begins with caring enough to see. I care enough to see you. I see you enough to understand you. I understand you enough to empathize with you. I empathize with you enough to attune to you and your human needs. I care enough to get that process right. If it takes me a week, a year, a month, I become competent at loving you with attunement to the point where you blossom with gratitude, with pleasure, with potential, where your field expands, where your awareness expands, because it's fun. Because when you are being loved, it's fun to see. When you are being hurt, it's not fun to see, it's fun to shut down. When you are being betrayed and violated, it's painful to see. And it's a relief to go unconscious, to addict, to go down into the traumatic spiral, because all human states are viral. Trauma replicates with the same efficiency as love, but love has the oomph of the entire universe behind it, because love leads to sustainable fun. Sustainable fun leads to a loved environment. When you sustainably love, you begin by investing in the host body to which you are biologically linked, ecologically a part of. To love leads to an investment in our host body, in our communities, in our people, in the feminine, in the authentic masculine, in our children, in our elderly, in our homeless, in our environment, in the technology that allows us to love better, to love more. It is more fun to love than not to love. It is more fun to succeed than to fail. It is more fun to bring joy to another human being than to cause them pain. It is more fun to be excellent than it is to be mediocre. It is more fun to partner and collaborate than it is to be isolated individuals. It is more fun to create beauty, truth, and goodness than it is to destroy it. And the traumatic virus from the reptilian brainstem and the cycle of violation, betrayal, and trauma, the traumatic virus is less fun. It is less fun to destabilize the planet and create more trauma, because that's what you do when you destabilize your host body. You increase the trauma of everyone on the host body. It's less fun to do that than it is to create grace. It's less fun to kill off most of the world's species. It's less fun to do farming on 1,000-acre monocrops that violate the biodiversity and ecology of complexity that is the mandate for replicating life. It's less fun than being on a rich, diverse ecology in a living ecosystem of healthy organic food. It's more fun to succeed than it is to fail. And so fun has profound consequences on a mathematical level. It is only a cult of profound arrogance that manages to ignore the science of fun and elevate the science of cruelty as somehow being more mature. In fact, you can tell an adult synonymous with a competent leader. You can tell an adult synonymous with a competent leader by how much they advocate personally, family, nationally, and as a species that the strong protect the young, that the big protect the small, that the wealthy care for a creation of an environment that shares that wealth, that the one in the most pain gets the first attention, and that we move towards a horizontal framework of value, honoring the innate goodness in something bigger than ourselves within each individual, and discounting the cult biases, which will change from cult to cult as thousands of cults form asymmetrical dogmas only to collapse under the weight of their dogma. Because there have been 10,000 cults in human history. There would only have been one cult if the first one got it right. Meaning if the first cult that was ever there created sustainable, competent levels of fun and well-being for every citizen through a series of principles, philosophies, beliefs, practices, and values, through a series of daily routines and protocols that ensured that every deviation from the cult led to more suffering for all concerned, and that every conformity to the cult led to greater well-being. In that scenario, you have a sustainable cult. It's not based on dogma, it's based on the science of well-being. Because every single human being in the history of the species has wanted to feel good and not to feel bad. If a cult develops the science of well-being such that the deviation from the cult increases suffering and the integration with the cult creates well-being, it is self-reinforcing. You don't need police. You don't need military. You don't need bullying. You don't need trauma. You do not need fear and threats. People deviate a little bit from the cult, their pain goes up. They watch everyone else enjoying themselves more and conforming with the cult. You're not an idiot. You touch a fire, it hurts, you come back, you do it less. The problem is that when a cult is dogmatic, to adhere to the cult is to participate in vast amounts of unnecessary suffering. So that when you deviate from the cult, your well-being goes up, and when you conform to the cult, it goes down. That is an unsustainable cult. And it will ultimately lead to rebellion and divisiveness within the cult, where half of the cult wants to do what's intelligent, and the other half wants to do what's always been done before. They split apart, they fight, and at the end of the battle, when there is no more status quo, and when the cult is not providing its kind of resource of certainty, those who remain will adapt the cult to a new cult that is a little bit more aligned with well-being until it goes through that process again. So cults are on an evolutionary process with a mixture of science and a mixture of dogma. And the cult that took a people from survival to security is not necessarily the cult that can take them from security to love and belonging. In the United States, the sense of love and belonging has been imploding and deteriorating as national gross domestic product is going up, and as the disparity between rich and poor becomes more extreme. In that dynamic, you have the cult touting its success as more and more Americans feel disenfranchised, isolated, have suicidal levels of loneliness and pain, and are not being counted. That is a cult on the way to collapse, on the way to revolution. Because a cult's primary service to its people is to put the brain to sleep by saying, look, it may not be perfect, but if you'll just go along with this bullshit, You won't have to think about anything 90% of the time. You can do what everyone else is doing 90% of the time. And it's just so much easier than thinking and worrying and facing the unknown, which in a traumatized populace is the most terrifying thing in the cult. It's one of the reasons for chauvinism. In the polarity between the knowledge that is known and the field of the unknown, much like the polarity between the proton and electron and the space between the proton and electron in the atom. You have 99% space in every atom. The space is the feminine. If you go to the larger fractal pattern of the same thing, 99% space is what the universe is. And then you have these little dots, planets, asteroids, these little particles within space. And if you look at knowledge within the conscious mind, less than 1% of all knowledge is conscious. 99% of it is unknown. The feminine dwarfs the masculine 99% to 1 in many mathematical fields. The particle and the space between the particle do not have an equal relationship. And it is this very fragility of the masculine value system that in some way leads to the powerlessness of the male ego, needing to dominate and reaffirm really its existence, its ability not to be dwarfed, the way every boy feels in relationship to the mother, the giant ogre, the giant witch, the giant who does what she damn well pleases, in relationship to this helpless thing that could be crushed at any moment. So, when you have pain and trauma, there's a feeling of helplessness, of powerlessness. Because if you were powerful and competent, you would stop the pain and trauma. Chronic pain and trauma is evidence of helplessness, powerlessness, and incompetency on all levels, because trauma spreads. And trauma is the least desirable human state. Meaning, referencing the goal to feel good and not feel bad, you have hit the fan. You have, shit in your face if you're in chronic trauma. Because that is the last place that every human in history wants to be. So there's only one reason to be there, and that is incompetency, ignorance, a lack of love on all sides. Because a community can intercept the trauma and PTSD of an individual if it loves enough to care, to become educated to respond. A community can heal the PTSD with honor of its members. To fail to do so is an act of ignorance, an act of hatred towards the entire community, because all human states spread. And the state most likely to lead to the destruction of the host body, be it the physical body, the community, the planet, or the species, is individuals in a chronic traumatized state who experience being induced into trauma by their cult and then left there on the outside, unable to achieve this core human goal, to feel good and not to feel bad. Those that want a war are in a traumatized state. Those that want to violate are in a traumatized state. Those that want to rape be it a boy, a girl, a woman, or the planet, are in a traumatized state. A state of such sociopathic numbness, such helplessness and hatred, mixed with mental knowledge, without empathy, that the exponential acceleration that is possible with human knowledge gets paired with the hatred that is present in every single individual in a traumatic cycle. Meaning, if you see someone in trauma and do nothing, you are filled with hatred towards your circle, because it is more competent, more fun, more successful, healthier. The odds of the circle experiencing more well-being and not feeling more unnecessary suffering go up exponentially when we have a cult in which people care about the trauma, the survival, the security, the love and belonging of everyone in the circle, be they a stranger, be they a family member, be they a student, be they a therapeutic patient. The probability field goes up more than 10 times, more than 1,000% with that one pivot towards empathy versus towards the reptilian brainstem. When reptiles encounter reptiles, the traumatic cycle repeats and continues infectiously. And it is the single biggest threat towards the host body upon which the entire human endeavor, the entire human experiment is based. When we cancerously kill off our host by growing out of sync with our mother, with our feminine host, with the body out of which all life on this planet has emerged, when we strip the feminine, when we strip the host of its balance, creating volatile and violent extremes in bacteria, in weather, in disease, in floods, in fires and volcanoes and earthquakes, we shatter the illusion of separation, indoctrinated by the sociopathic edict that says that we are separate individuals rather than part of a larger organism in an evolutionary state that has an ultimate destiny of well-being, love, competency, excellence, joy, and love. This is the inevitable destination of all conscious life because it is more fun. So let's look at a few more equations. Competency equals the drive for fun equals the drive for success equals the need for competency. The need for competency leads to the need for awareness. You cannot be competent without awareness. All competency comes from awareness. We must be aware of pain and fun to feel good and guide us in that direction. So if we have if we take too many anesthetics, too much blame, too much shame, too much drugs, too much alcohol, too much sex or TV, whatever it is, if we take too much drugs, too much busyness, too much tapping away at our video games, so that we lose all sense of pain and joy, of healing and destruction, if we lose the map because there's just so much pain, We want to numb out. We lose awareness. We need awareness of our target and where we are in relationship to it. The target of sustainable well-being. And how much pain we're in. How much pain we're in determines how much we're failing in our goal. Now, this equals a map of reality that works. It's not just awareness of pain and pleasure. We also need awareness of a paradigm, of a map that successfully, more times than not, elevates well-being when we move in that direction. And this is the framework of mathematics. So, in the cult dogma of a racist South, the black kid always did it. The overlay of mathematics, logic and reason, says they couldn't have done it. Joey, the white boy, was at the till at the time. Now, this shift from a paradigm of instinct based on hatred, bias, and bigotry to science and information leads to more sustainable well-being. Because everyone loses in racism. Everyone loses in ageism. Everyone loses in capitalism, in the elevation of money above the human beings who make the money, in the deification of paper over the human beings paper was invented to serve. Invented by none other, not than paper. Paper didn't invent paper. Human beings invented paper to serve human beings, not to serve paper. Which is why the map of behavior that is based on a faulty assumption that bits of paper are more valuable than the human beings who invented it, more valuable than the human beings who created the paradigm, and more valuable than the human beings who started and built the company, and more valuable than the human lives that will be damaged if bits of paper are deified over human beings, is a faulty map. A map that leads to increased suffering and decreased fun and levels of human well-being, relative to another map that returns a higher yield. This is why intelligence is measured by the efficiency by which time, money, attention, and natural resources are transformed into human well-being. If you can take $1, a minute of time, a thought, and one tree, so to speak, let's just say, and turn that into 500 hours of human happiness with 500 people, you are far more intelligent, mathematically speaking, not culturally speaking, mathematically speaking. You are far more intelligent than an individual that takes $1 billion, cuts down a whole forest, and takes 10 years to destroy a town and leave misery in their wake, and have as the one thing elevated above all else for such an abomination as I turned $1 million into $2 million, and having ruined this town, I now have money to invest in machinery and technology, not in human beings, to more quickly and efficiently destroy the next town as I turn $2 million into 4. You know you're dealing with a faulty cult, with a faulty paradigm, when massive amounts of success defined by the cult, in other words, turning 1 bit of paper into 2 bits of paper, 2 bits of paper into 4, leave devastation on an ecological and human scale on their wake. You understand, this is not intelligent. This is dogmatic stupidity. And all dogmatic stupidity results in trauma. All trauma results in sociopathic states. All sociopathic individuals who have been harmed by a corrupt paradigm get out their pitchforks and run the dogma out of town when the pain gets loud enough to be more relevant to the individuals involved than the ease of the dogma. Because the ease of the dogma, as we all know, is we don't have to think. We can just do what everyone else is doing. And however barbaric or stupid the status quo may be, we're not going to be blamed for it if we're just doing what everyone else is doing. We're just following orders from the cult. What do you mean my 5,000 square foot mansion is bad for the environment? My neighbor has a 10,000 square foot mansion. I have the right to I have the right to participate in a cult that consumes more energy, time, money, natural resources per capita than any other cult in human history at an unsustainable level that is equivalent to a cancer feeding on its host more rapidly than the host can regenerate, which inevitably mathematically leads to the phenomena of collapse and the death of the cancer on the host body. We need a map of reality that works. Works in what? Creating large amounts of human well-being, creating large amounts of fun while conserving energy. That creates massive amounts of well-being with very little natural resources, very little time, very little money, very little struggle and pain and unnecessary suffering. That is a map of reality that works. How do you get a map of reality that works when you have a dogma consistent to the status quo? You have to do studies. Here in Denmark, we give students $1,000 a month to take a well-developed college in a subject that they're interested in with no student debt. We give them $1,000 a month to go to college every month. And as a result, our students are all college educated with things that they like, and they have no student debt. What are the results? Well, our trauma is lower. Our fear and anxiety is lower. Our children's interest in our country and praise of our country is higher, meaning it's a closer map to reality or to well-being. We have not guided our children into so much pain for which they hate us and want to destroy our system. You compare that with the American experiment, where university costs have gone up 2 to 4 times, where the amount of money someone gets from a college degree has gone down, and you have high levels of student debt and friction within the system. Unnecessary suffering is being elevated by that dogma. The science is clear. You measure the level of human well-being in the Danish college student statistically against the level of well-being in the American college student statistically. The trauma levels are significantly lower, which means the cult is significantly more viable. So you need a map that works. A competent map of reality increases our success, and an incompetent map of reality increases our failure. Increased failure to create well-being and avoid unnecessary suffering leads to increased pain. Increased pain leads to the activation of the reptilian programming within the individual brain, which leads to increased sociopathic behavior, which shares that pain with everyone else. We've touched briefly on human needs. Abraham Maslow did studies to show that every human being, every healthy human being, has a hierarchy of needs to survive. To survive equals more success and more fun than death and failure. We're referencing the ultimate deity of fun. To feel secure in our survival equals more relaxation and more future thinking equals more fun than insecurity. To experience love and belonging. It's more fun to be loved. It's more fun to belong than to be shut out. But it also, if you belong, and the way that you know if you belong is if someone else will experience pain to help mitigate your pain. For example, you're an elderly person in a burning building. In a sociopathic cult, let him burn. You know that you belong in your cult. If someone will risk death to run into the building and carry you out of the flames, you also know you're dealing with an individual in a transcendent state. Because they're increasing their physical pain in order to heal their psychological pain. Their psychological pain comes from things like, I don't matter. This world is just about money. No one would ever care about me and give a damn if I was stuck. This is psychological pain because it violates the highest possibility field of the species, which is to function in transcendent synergy by participating in something bigger than ourselves. So when you're in psychological pain, the response is to say, I'd rather risk my life to be part of a cult that cares about its elderly, that is willing to show empathy, that is willing to sacrifice to be something bigger than itself, that I want to belong to a cult that loves, that is willing to take a small risk to save a human life. And so I'm going into that building. Now, admittedly, this can reach a level of stupidity if there is a 99% chance of not coming out of the building, either one of you. But if the odds are, let's say, 5 to 1, if I go in there, I've got a 80% chance of coming out at least alive and saving another human life, then the entire cult is ennobled, is lifted towards transcendence. Little boys seeing that say, I want to save someone's life too. That's the act of a hero. That's the act of someone who thinks bigger than the individual self. And we all dream. We all dream of being bigger than ourselves, because to be bigger than ourselves is to be the gods and goddesses we project onto the ecosphere. In ecological thinking and framework, we are always part of something bigger than ourselves. We're part of something bigger than ourselves. And to serve something bigger than ourselves is what makes life meaningful, gives dignity, to have a small part of the deity inside. I'm a part of this planet. Ennobles, increases the size of the individual. There's a story about a cathedral that took over 100 years to construct. And so you have a sense of vision, of course, in a religious framework that will start building a tribute to beauty, truth, and goodness that is bigger than the human lifespan at the time. To be a part of something bigger than ourselves. A stranger was walking by the cathedral, talked to the brickmaker. "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm laying bricks." Talked with a cement mixer. "What are you doing?" "Well, I'm mixing cement." Talked with a carpenter making beams to hold up the ceiling. "What are you doing?" "He's making beams." And he talked with a little old man sweeping up the dirt left by all the tradesmen in this cathedral that was half built. It would take more than 100 years to finish. And he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Me? I'm building a cathedral." Who do you think had the sense of purpose? Who do you think had the largest vision? Who do you think had a sense of something bigger, more transcendent than themselves? The person who identifies with a mission bigger than the individual ego, who is part of a larger team. I'm part of the human form of the consciousness experiment to see how beautiful, good, and true of all the different expressions of consciousness throughout all time, throughout the multiverse. I'm part of the experiment that thinks we can create beauty, truth, and goodness following mathematical guidelines that deliver higher and higher yields of human well-being per unit of energy invested, and can shed light with all the other expressions of consciousness that are physical and non-physical in other universes and other places. I'm part of the consciousness that said, let's give this human thing a try. That said, let's go into matter. That said, let's go into this body. Let's set up the psyche this way and see how much love, how much competency, how much beauty, truth, and goodness can be revealed within the rules of the game. I'm a player in that game, and I will be around lifetime after lifetime for thousands of years until we figure out how to play and play well, as evidenced by a thriving host body, as evidenced by diminished interplanetary conflict, as evidenced by every individual feeling that the unique gifts of their souls are welcomed into the game by a cult competent to see the uniqueness of the individual, to find a valuable role for the uniqueness of the individual, to create meaning, purpose, survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, the development of gifts, the bringing out of those gifts to create abundance, and the moving to a vision larger than the individual self. I am going to stay around until we win that game, until an app measures every single human on this planet. And when they say, in the truth of their own heart, that they are surviving, that they feel secure in that survival, that they experienced love and belonging, that someone would risk their life to protect them, that they like the person they're becoming closer to their values, that they know what's unique about them and how to bring that out into the world, that the abundance that they're experiencing and co-creating is growing, and that they're a part of a larger vision that is beautiful to them, that's true to them, that's real, that they're a part of something bigger than themselves. That when every human being can answer those questions this week on the app, we know we've won the game. We know we've won the game. A game in which the more people who win, the more people who win. All human states are infectious. That's part of the rules. That's part of the paradigm of empathy and mirror neurons. The more people who are happy, who are having fun, the easier it is for those not having fun to catch the virus. In part because the memes that lead to joy and fun are infectious as well. In a sociopathic, chauvinistic environment like the United States, every teenage boy knows that part of his rank is how many girls he can fuck. And so, the majority of boys look enviously around to see who do these girls in my school want to fuck. And they want to learn from them. They want to be their friends. They want to understand the lies they have to tell. They want to understand the clothes they need to wear, the way they need to speak to get sexual rank in the sociopathic alpha system, in which shame, lack of belonging, emotional illiteracy, relational illiteracy results in large amounts of abused children without the knowledge and technology to counteract or heal those wounds. Substituting an empathic cultural system for an alpha system in which looking cool is a compromised adaptation when love is unavailable at home, at school by the teachers, and at school by the siblings. When love is off the table, looking cool, having some sense of love and belonging. For a woman, maybe that's fucking a guy on the football team. For a man, maybe that's wearing the right clothes, having the right answers, having enough money from dad, whatever it is that a sociopathic cult elevates. You learn whatever your cult teaches you with the aspiration of climbing the cult ladder. A problem with a dysfunctional cult, a dysfunctional map, pointed out by Stephen Covey, is you can get to the top of the ladder in a cult, only to discover it's leaning against the wrong object. It's leaning against the wrong tree. You get the money, you play football, you buy the Gucci handbag, you drive an uncomfortable, noisy, low-to-the-ground Ferrari. And after all your sacrifices to the cult to make the bits of paper to pay for this BS, you realize your fun, your joy is not worth the sacrifice to the soul to play this game to get this far in it. It certainly hasn't delivered the sustainable joy and fun that was promised. And in some cases, the most fun thing about being at the top of a cult hierarchy, once you discover that it is not a source of unending joy, happiness, healing, intelligence, love, or sustainability, is the fact that people at the bottom of the cult don't yet know that happiness by climbing the ladder is a lie. So one of the most enjoyable things about being at the top of a cult within its ranking system is other people giving you attention, wanting to learn from you, envying you, projecting happiness onto you. And it can be fun to pretend to be happy and to be the center of attention, meaning you get a boost of love and belonging by being at the top of a cult, dogma, hierarchy, even if it doesn't deliver the goods. But since we all have a human need to feel love and belonging, to feel valued, to feel significant, if the best way within a defunct cult to get any sense of belonging, love, significance, is to climb an erroneous ladder pointing on the wrong tree that doesn't in and of itself deliver that much well-being, but hey, feels pretty noisy and uncomfortable in this Lamborghini. But everyone around me is looking at me and imagining I'm having a good time. I'll take it. I'd rather people look at me than be invisible. And if people look at a car more than they look at a human soul, what can I do about it? To experience love and belonging is more fun than being shut out. It also guarantees survival. Going back to the fire thing, you know you belong if someone will risk their life to protect yours. Meaning to belong strengthens survival and security. To experience self-esteem, the integrity between our map of progress versus a painful gap between who we want to be and who we are. When we have high self-esteem, we have ideals. I believe in truth. I believe in science. I believe in empathy over sociopathic behavior as a mathematical probability field. I believe in beauty over asymmetrical stupidity. I believe in these things, and I'm moving towards those ideals. Never accomplishing them, never perfect, but I grow self-esteem that I'm trying and I'm measuring my steps forward towards the ideal. So I earn the love that I have for anyone who's embodying my sense of the divine, the beauty, truth, and goodness that I project into my ideals that I'm becoming. To develop our talents, gifts, and abilities. Now, when we become the people we want to be, it always has some connection with well-being. As I say, we are miseducated, so we may believe that to fuck a new woman every night or have a Ferrari or whatever is, oh, it's just heaven. Couldn't get any better than that until you try it, and then you realize it feels like shit. Well, then you have to develop a new map, a new ladder to climb. But nonetheless, whatever it is that we deify, when we're climbing that ladder, we're growing. And we feel proud. We have a sense of self-esteem. We also get more success. And we may get success climbing the wrong ladder, pointed on the wrong tree, but we're still succeeding. And succeeding equals competency. So we're building competency. So by the time we discover that our cult has lied to us, that the tree is pointing in the wrong direction, we now have a discipline that we gained climbing the ladder we were lied would bring us to happiness. So we have more odds of survival and security. We have more odds of love, which is more fun. Nobody aspires as an ideal to be stupid, to be ignorant, to be helpless, to be incompetent, and to fail. So whatever the principles are that we aspire to in order to earn our need for self-esteem, they are principles and values that lead us in the direction generally speaking, of well-being. Some cults distort that more than others. If you live in a tribe that measures your status by how big of a plate you can put between your mouth and your lip, you may develop a tremendous amount of discipline, pain tolerance, and cult status by disfiguring your body more than the next person, and be in a similar situation as the Lamborghini. Listening to that horrible engine, changing a stick figure, being low to the ground, worrying about your paint being chipped, worrying about theft. The whole thing is a terrible experience, but having everyone look at you and think how great you are feels pretty nice. Well, if you can get someone or a tribe of people to look at you because you've got a giant plate disfiguring your mouth, the plate may feel pretty terrible. But having everyone bow a little bit deeper to you because you've got a big plate in your face feels pretty good. To bring these gifts into our environment masterfully equals more survival, security, love, esteem. More refined gifts equals more competency, equals more success. Success at what? Feeling good, not feeling bad, equals more fun. To participate in the co-creation of something bigger than the isolated sense of self equals more competency. Survival, security, love, esteem, and gifts equals more success, equals more fun. The reason this is an interesting hierarchy of human needs is that each one reinforces the other. To survive, you may need to violate the transcendent state in a sociopathic environment. But when you enter an empathic transcendent state in partnership with other human beings in a transcendent empathic state, you create more survival, more security, more love and belonging, etc. beneath. All the other values are strengthened by the one on top. So all of this equals to moving through the various operating systems and brain functions successfully. So I talked about the reptilian brain, we have the mammalian brain, we have the more thinking, future, analytical brain, we have the more transcendent brain. So we start off with reptilian instinct. Not a lot of fun. Reptilian instinct paired with knowledge, you got more success. With more success can come more safety. With more safety can come the release of the reptilian consciousness into something more empathic. Mammalian limbic instinct paired with knowledge of the future equals more success, equals more feeling. More dimensions upon which fun can be had equals more fun. Human empathic instinct equals, first of all, mimicking one's group in order to belong, which leads to more security, more survival. More belonging equals more synergy, equals more success, equals more fun. Human empathic instinct paired with knowledge equals increased competency, equals increased success, equals increased abundance, equals more feelings of love, equals more fun. When we get to transcendent consciousness, the first thing that is tremendously equaled is partnering. So you partner. Transcendent consciousness means you identify with something bigger than yourself more than you identify with yourself. I'm a part of a planet. Well, when you believe and understand that you are part of a planet, it doesn't make sense to destroy the planet to protect the individual or to protect this country or whatever. If necessary, you would destroy the country to protect the planet that is the host of the species. Because if you understand that the species depends on the planet, and you understand that the planet is the host of the species, then if you have to decide between destroying the planet to protect a small group of the species or destroying the small group of the species to protect the planet, the mathematical equation is clear. Because if the small group succeeds as a cancer to destroy the planet, then the small group will die, or their children will, along with everyone else. So it's not mathematically sound when you're in a transcendent state to prioritize the small part versus the big part. Now, with increased partnering comes increased synergy. There is an exponential degree of synergy that is possible. There's an exponential degree of grace that is possible in a transcendent state, in a synergistic paradigm in partnership with every other person on the planet. When you are in a transcendent state in a group that has sustained a transcendent state, the first thing that goes down is all defense. Why do you need door knocks if everyone loves enough to understand, to empathize, and respects one another? Why do you need to lock your door? Why do you need car keys when no one steals each other's car? Why do you need health insurance when whoever is in the most pain gets immediate attention within the community? Why do you need to have bombs when you are in partnership with other people and teaching countries around the world this same level of consciousness and its mathematical superiority? It's mathematically superior 1,000 to 1. So you have reduced expenditures in defense and sociopathic militarization at every level, at the individual level, at the family level, at the community level. You have, you don't have the IRS disappears. There's so much stuff that is based on the idea that we are in so much pain as individuals that given half the choice without massive amounts of fear, we will hurt each other, betray each other, and get away with it, and no one would ever stop us unless there's a bigger bully. So that all goes down, and all of that energy gets reorganized to create massive amounts of abundance. While the United States was killing more than 1 million Iraqis to fight the war on terror, in other words, while the United States was terrifying an entire country in order to fight a feeling, the war on terror. Terror is a feeling. How can we fight terror? I know. Let's terrify an entire country. Some isolated individuals got together and made us feel scared for a few days and killed 3,000 lives. Let's kill 1 million lives and terrify an entire country for years. And let's terrify the rest of the world that you're next. That's how we fight a feeling in a sociopathic abuse cult. It's not intelligent. It's not mathematical. You don't call that a success if you say, okay, your goal is to reduce terror. Okay, there was 3,000 deaths. Okay, let's say they were all terrified. Okay, so you had 3,000 deaths. Now, if you win the war on terror, what you would do is you'd go and find 3,000, 6,000, whatever. Let's say we want 2-to-1 ratio of progress. So we'd find 6,000 people who currently are terrified in the world, and we would behave in a competent, loving way with them so that 6,000 people would feel less terrified than the people. So now we had 3,000 people descend into terror, and then we're going to lift 6,000 people out of terror, and that's how we're going to heal the virus that is sociopathic terror in our world. Okay, so where's 6,000 people who are terrified? Well, let's start at home. How about the several million American children who are so abused they leave home without a legal guardian before the age of 18 and are sexually exploited, become part of crime, various things. How about several million American children? How about spending the $1 trillion that we spent terrifying the rest of the world, lifting the terror from our own children? This is mathematics. It's not cult. This is not how a cult thinks. A cult does what it does because it does what it does, and that's why it does what it does, because it does what it does, and it worked before, so we're going to do it now, and we're not going to think about it. Because if you think about the pathological cruelty, the insane level of cruelty, the mathematical stupidity, I mean, there are no words to describe the joke of the United States going to war with a feeling and spending $1 trillion of the next generation's money to kill 1 million people on trumped up intelligence reports and leave another 1 million children with PTSD and trauma to grow up hating and fearing the United States. If you tried to figure out how efficiently to butcher a people, to kill a country, to drive it insane, and to tear it in half, it would be hard to come up with a better use of the money. And then, since it didn't work so well over here, let's start bombing Afghanistan, and let's start teaching teenagers in our country to be so sociopathic towards another human being as to kill people based on what? Their dopamine is getting low at that moment? Let's kill another person today? Yeah. Release some of the pent-up frustration from a sociopathic abuse system at home and turn it out on another country. With a discrepancy in force and a level of hypocrisy that makes the United States government the single biggest terrorist organization in the world. That is a level of stupidity that it takes a cult in trauma with no rationality to contemplate. And just to drive everyone crazy, let's call it the war on terror and not call it the fastest way to ruin our children's future, to terrify ourselves, our children, and the world by demonstrating how dumb we are and borrowing large sums of money to give to our children in the form of debt. Here's the inheritance of your cult. Be grateful. You see, competent love leads naturally to gratitude and the infection of love. Cruelty, sociopathic behavior, and trauma renamed as loved by an abuse cult and by abusive parents leads to cynicism, leads to bitterness, leads to distrust, leads to pain, leads to self-mutilation and suicide. What do we have around us? Children feeling authentically respectful and loving to the giants who abused them, or feeling hobbled, crippled by a lack of emotional literacy, by a lack of relational literacy, by a lack of psychological literacy, traumatic literacy, and intelligent repair. We are in the midst of a wound that is getting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper as we move towards bottom. And the only powerful thing in the algorithm of evolution that's going on here is at some point the pain gets so big that we willingly sacrifice the cult, the dogma, the sociopathic path that was laid before, to turn to science, the science of well-being. The science that says, I don't care if you call it communist, I don't care if you call it socialist, I don't care if you call it a pig, I don't care if you call it whatever. We are going to listen and live by the best data sets available using objective science. The Danish students coming out of their high school with no student debt have less trauma than American students and pick more interesting careers relevant to their culture, and their happiness is higher. We're going to start by doing it the Danish way because we love enough to be competent. We are competent enough to see, to care, to understand, and to attune. There is no love without competence. There is no competence without high levels of sustainable well-being. The evidence of how stupid or competent a cult is how loving and unloving it is by how much sustainable well-being is present per person in the cult that follows those doctrines, those dogmas, those protocols. And the growth rate. If you are in a cult that has high levels of multidimensional well-being, spread evenly throughout the population, and getting better year over year, and measuring that well-being per unit of energy expended in a sustainable relationship with the host body, meaning that if we lived this way for 1,000 years, our host body would be healthier and better able to support us than it is today. It's not just neutral, it's better. Then you know you're in an intelligent cult. If you are in a cult that has massive levels of pain and suffering at every level of the cult, where you can succeed and be the richest person on the planet and be no more happy or incompetent than the poorest, and that in order to get rich you had to do lots of damage to other human beings on the planet, you're now dealing with, and that if everyone does what the cult recommends, the planet will be in a worse state. The host body will be in a worse state than it is today. You are dealing with a pathological abuse cult that hates itself so much it is tail spinning towards suicide. And the individuals who commit suicide in an abuse cult are forerunners. As a cult becomes more abusive, more and more people commit suicide. As radar, as kind of warning, early warning signals. If you keep on doing this, if you do not destroy the host body long before we end in the ultimate destination, where every single human being is in a sociopathic state, suffering, smallness, we will all kill ourselves. And then the earth can go back to rejuvenating and producing a new mutation, a new host body for consciousness. The earth doesn't lose. The universe doesn't lose. We can nuke this planet half to death and kill 90% of human life. And in another 10 million years, there will be another host body capable of conscious imagination and thought. And if they follow the sociopathic path down into stupidity and destroy themselves or delay progress and evolution, in another 5 million, in another 10 million years, there will be another, and another, and another, until a species is born that is competent enough to understand mathematics over the fear of the unknown, the fear of the feminine, and the adherence to the cult. This is certainty. You can destroy your planet, your species, your country. You can ruin your children's future. You cannot stop the inevitable mathematics of life. Life was built to withstand your experimentation, your failure, and stupidity. And it was built to celebrate your success. Your success at creating more well-being per unit of energy than you did last year. Your success at avoiding unnecessary suffering. Life supports both. It supports freedom as part of the experiment. Understanding the chicken and egg pattern, where sociopathic environment equals triggering the reptilian instinct, and an empathic environment equals triggering the empathic instinct, we have a knowledgeable map. Because we know that to the degree that we use power to violate and hurt our young through action or inaction, through incompetence, through a lack of love, we create an environment that our infants experience as reptilian, as sociopathic. And that the more sociopathic the outer environment, the more the reptilian program of fight, flight, freeze, it's me or someone else, I'm going to sacrifice you to get ahead, just like you sacrificed me to get ahead. I'm going to do that back to create symmetry. When you're surrounded by reptiles, if you are empathic with a reptile, you are destroyed. That's just the mathematics of the deal. If you open the door and give the key to your house to a murderer, who by definition is in a sociopathic state, your empathy towards someone in a sociopathic state means you die faster than meeting the sociopathic state with a sociopathic state. Now, this is a profound mathematical truth, because what it means is that we enter the empathic state together or not at all. If you're all chanting Om Mi Patra Om in a Buddhist monastery, and one kid gets out an automatic weapon and starts firing into the ceiling, that's one person in a sociopathic state amongst hundreds. But watch the disintegration of the state, the transcendent state to the reptilian state, as soon as the first shot is fired. We cannot release consciousness from the reptilian brain to the empathic brain and the empathic brain into the transcendent state without doing it together. And the best way to do it together is to teach competent parenting, beginning with not having as many children until we know what we're doing, and studying 3 or 4 years to understand that the next generation is the single most important thing for the human experiment that we can possibly study. So if it's worth studying how to fly a plane for 6 years, how to be a dentist for 4 to 6 years, how to be a doctor for 4 to 6 years, it is worth studying how to parent the psyche, to rapidly grow through the meeting of all human needs, to learn the art of taking love through competency back into love, back into competency in a viral meme, to learning the underlying mathematics of intelligence and well-being, and by systematically dismantling the stupidity and the brutish cruelty of our cults that block this development, often with as simple an instinct as I'm bigger than you so I can, and I will, because when you've been abused when you were small, the number one goal you have in a sociopathic environment is to become big. So you become a president or a leader in the military. And once you become big, your number one goal is to not feel small like you did before. A sociopathic environment doesn't take care of you, so you climb to the top of the rank system so that it can't hurt you. Once you're there, you're a sociopath with a lot of power. Welcome to the abuse state. That doesn't change until our global leaders are treated decently because they're human beings as children. That's when you don't need to climb the rank system, and empathy feels a lot more fun. The entire human experiment can be summed up as the quest or question. Every question leads to a quest. How do we create a culture environment where an individual child can be born into, in which they progress rapidly and consciously through their fulfillment of their human needs, and allow another competent individual to participate transcendently in the synergy of intelligent grace. See, the top of the human need fulfillment, and it is a hierarchy, so you don't move on to your, is transcendence, to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. A field in which it takes less and less energy to create more and more sustainable fun. One of the things this leads is to Dunbar's number. The anthropologist discovered that, remember the process of moving from understanding to empathy and from empathy to attunement, that you have to have a certain amount of intimacy, a certain amount of knowledge about someone to feel the empathy and rapport that makes love possible in any real way. And he discovered that it's about 150 people, meaning if you spend your life in a group of 150 people, you will remember their birthdays, you will remember their godparents, you'll remember their scars, you'll remember their trauma when they were 8-year-old, and you will attune to the people around you if the group is 150 or less. After 150, you start violating all kinds of things because you cannot love more than 150 people, because you cannot see more than 150 people. So you can't understand more than 150 people. So you cannot empathize with more than 150 people. So you cannot attune with more than 150 people. So you cannot succeed to disseminate the virus of love for more than 150 people sustainably and reliably. That if you want success, you've got to limit groups to groups that the human brain can process, which maxes out at 150 people. So Dunbar's number, which correlates to the size of many of our ancient tribes and cultures. Many of our cultures split. Even chimpanzees split at a certain point. They split into two factions. Tribes split into two factions. So you have this very important number that relates to human biology. What the brain can track and feel is real. It's 150 people. This leads to understanding how many how many groups can first realize a transcendent state of culture and then mingle, share, collaborate, synergize with other groups to sustain this state of consciousness in shared peaceful abundance, which is more efficient and fun than doing so at the expense of another group. See, when you break groups down into 150 people, your neighborhood, whatever it is, you can have real intimacy. But particularly if you don't have the competency to transcend the reptilian brain, then the entire world becomes your enemy because they're all unknown. When you're traumatized and abused when you're young, the whole world is an unknown and you're afraid of the unknown. You're not excited about the adventure and the chance to meet the human psyche in 1,000 different faces. The emphasis on the fear of strangers is evidence of this in the United States. So obviously, if you can create not only a loving, competent, high-fun, high-yield state in your 150-person group, but you can go out and have peaceful relationships and support. See, this is key. You have to support the people around you in obtaining a transcendent, competent, loving state. If you do not, and they enter a reptilian state because they lack the competency to succeed, because you were too sociopathic to support them, they will violate you because you will be the enemy. You will be different from them. You will be part of the feminine unknown that must be attacked to protect their identity. The more fearful, the more pain a group is in, the more fear they have. All fear is a projection of pain in the future. You don't project pain in the future if you don't have a lot of pain in the present. All fear is a symptom of past pain and present pain projected into the future. So every human being has a core drive to feel good and not feel bad. How can you possibly distort that down to a point where you abandon that core drive, traumatize the individuals to such an point that they are terrified of their environment, the world, and the unknown, and then attack you because you lacked, I guess, the competency, the love, to make things more available for them. It's more efficient to partner and teach shared well-being than it is to compete, hide, demonize, attack, and kill other people. It's more efficient, which means it's more fun. It's more efficient to feel good and not feel bad, to partner with other people than it is to hate and attack them. Sharing the technology of fun with everyone freely and providing maps where any group can do the same with certainty equals reduced pain, fear, and trauma and failure, which equals more peaceful collaboration, which equals more feeling of well-being, which is more fun. Investing in the science of consciousness, the science of culture, the science of communication, the science of relationship. I mean, if we understand that these are the sciences that determine more than any other thing how effectively, meaning we can have space travel with sociopathic people running the space company and sociopathic people buying tickets and sociopathic people on the space ship and in the space colony, and have less fun and well-being while consuming vast amounts of resources than we can have with a village with no with no knowledge of physics, who has the technology of empathy, the technology of communication, the technology of agriculture and sustainable earth cohabitation. Meaning, someone or a tribe that cannot read can experience more well-being living in sustainable collaboration with the planet than sociopaths induced into trauma at childhood, buying million-dollar tickets to Mars in the latest technology. One could say that the tribe is more intelligent because it is generating more sustainable well-being for the planet and for one another than the sociopathic addicts heading to Mars and consuming vast amounts of natural resources to enter a physical void that is as rich and nuanced as the emotional void inside their hearts and the gap between themselves and another human being. This equals, we're looking at a series of implications of pursuing fun. This equals understanding love, the thoughts, feelings, and behavior that allows us as an individual to meet each of their human needs and then turn their attention to helping others do the same, from caring to competency, and from competency to success, from success to abundance, gratitude, joy, and well-being, and back to love. This leads to the understanding of hate, the exclusion of individuals from access to the resources they need to realize these goals efficiently without violence. This is self-hatred, and it is hatred of the probability field, and it is hatred of the individuals. Because if you exclude a racial minority, a country, an individual from the opportunity to meet all of their human needs and access a transcendent state, you rob the field of the synergistic power of their gifts. You spend energy to put up walls. Why walls? Because if you want to have a billionaire live next to a group of people that do not know how to physically survive, you're going to have high crime. As the people try and take the asymmetrical distribution of the Earth's resources and share them in an empathic instinct that says we need, you do not need, so we have a right to live, a right to survive, a right to feel secure in our survival, a right to love and belonging, and you have violated the most sacred human ethic, which means you must be destroyed, so that leadership emerges that is more competent and consistent with mathematics. You must be destroyed because you are in violation of human rights, the right of every human being to meet their need to survive, to feel secure, to have love and belonging, to have dignity and self-esteem, and to develop their unique talents. In this paradigm, you have an inevitable dismantling of that power structure, or the power structure, the billionaire in this case, has to spend more and more energy on walls, guards, military support, police, to kill, attack, traumatize, shame, put in jail the people who try and redistribute the energy in a more intelligent format.